sloppy stuff going on out there with mainstream media, and maybe it's always existed. But this article that was written by the New York Times, which colluded with Blake Lively, right? They teamed up with her for months to write this hit piece on Justin Baldoni, is an example of bad journalism. They teamed up for months to get this article down. They only reached out to Justin Baldoni the night before. They gave him like 4 hours to respond on a Friday night, days before Christmas. Guy's trying to put together some doll, easy bake oven thing. He's got all of his tools out. His wife's yelling at him, "Hey, reading the directions," and he's like, "No, I'm getting."
The gloves are officially off. Candace Owens just dropped a bombshell that could turn the entire Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni saga completely upside down. After being served with a subpoena demanding her private communications, Owens fired back with words that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. "I should sue them for defamation." But here's the million-dollar question that nobody's asking. Could this legal chess match actually expose the dark underbelly of how mainstream media manufactures scandals? And more importantly, is Blake Lively about to face the consequences of a strategy that may have backfired spectacularly? If you're ready to dive deep into this explosive legal battle, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because we're about to break down every shocking detail. Trust me, you'll want to watch this entire video. The bombshells we reveal at the end will leave you speechless.
On the topic of everything being fake and gay, and how all of this really is connected and really is a challenge for us to recognize that we are at war with our press. This has been the importance of the Blake Lively lawsuit. People, why are you covering this? Are you crazy? This is exactly what it is that we're talking about. Okay, a couple goes to the New York Times amongst their powerful elite friends and says, "Hey, I just kind of want the publishing from this guy, Justin Baldoni. And so we're just going to make up this narrative. And do you mind writing this article, Megan Toohey?" Yeah, one of the people who launched the Me Too movement. "Do you mind just writing this article?" Because that works typically. Companies get completely sunk and they have to sell really quickly if we just kind of smear them with the idea that they're a rapist. And the New York Times said, "Yeah, sure, that's not a problem."
Battle lines have been drawn, and what happens next could change everything. Let's cut straight to the explosive revelation that has everyone talking. Blake Lively's legal team made a calculated move that could either be brilliant strategy or a catastrophic miscalculation. They issued a subpoena directly to Candace Owens, one of the most prominent voices questioning Lively's narrative. This wasn't just any ordinary legal document. The subpoena was surgical in its precision, demanding access to Owens' private communications, source materials, editorial processes, and any behind-the-scenes conversations related to her coverage of the Baldoni case. But here's what makes this particularly aggressive. They're essentially treating Owens like a hostile witness rather than an independent journalist.
This article, and the only takeaway you could have as a reader was that this guy was the biggest creep ever. Justin Baldoni was the biggest creep, porn addicted, can't stop talking about sex, tried to cop a look of her boob while she was breast pumping, because I guess that's very attractive, a machine going quack, quack, quack.
Legal theory driving this move is fascinating and reveals just how sophisticated Lively's strategy has become. Her team believes they can prove that what appeared to be organic, independent criticism of Lively's case was actually a coordinated public relations campaign orchestrated by Baldoni's legal team. They're arguing that Owens wasn't functioning as a journalist at all, but rather as an undisclosed advocate receiving direction, talking points, and possibly financial compensation. The subpoena specifically sought to uncover 3 critical elements. First, whether Owens received any form of payment or financial incentive for her coverage. Second, whether she was provided with specific talking points or narrative guidance. And third, whether there were coordinated timing strategies for when certain information would be released or discussed.
Yes. Why would the judge allow this? This is an absolute nonsense. So we went to them and said, Candace has never been told what to publish. That was a part of their subpoena, wanting to figure out whether people were sending us talking points, whether or not people had paid us, whether or not people were encouraging, asking us to say certain things throughout an episode. It's a nonsense. In fact, I should sue them for defamation for even suggesting that I would let somebody put words in my mouth.
Wow.
If Lively's team can prove any of these elements, it would fundamentally transform the public perception of the coverage Baldoni has received. Instead of independent voices raising legitimate questions, it becomes a sophisticated AstroTurf campaign designed to manipulate public opinion. But Owens' response revealed just how high the stakes have become. She didn't just deny the allegations, she declared legal war. Her attorney immediately characterized the subpoena as absolute nonsense and moved to quash it entirely, invoking reporter privilege protections that shield journalists from having to reveal sources or editorial processes.
me now. That feels like an untraceable campaign. Blake Lively. Okay. Cut that out right now.
Cut that out.
And he said, obviously that's not true. Like, do you even know who Candace is? And we absolutely are not giving you our communications. We will file to completely quash this subpoena, and we will win because we will cite reporter's privilege. You know that Candace went out and said, if you have any tips, send it to her line at tips@CandaceOwens.com. You know that she then began receiving tips. So what are you trying to do? What game are you trying to play? Are you trying to like find a communication and then try to trot it out as PR proof? Like, oh yeah, no, Candace, see, they were all involved and colluding in February of 2025 after we filed our lawsuit. That's a nonsense. And they had a friendly conversation. You know, the lawyers had a friendly conversation, and they asked us not to file the quash until they could see they filed some motion, whether or not they could win on forcing the defendants of this case, Brian Friedman and Justin Baldoni, to have to give their communication so that it won't actually involve me at all. Meaning,
Here's where Owens made her most explosive countermove. She publicly stated, "I should sue them for defamation for even suggesting that I would let somebody put words in my mouth." This isn't just rhetoric. It's a direct legal threat that flips the entire dynamic. Instead of being on the defensive, Owens is positioning herself as the victim of false accusations that damage her professional reputation. The strategic implications of this move cannot be overstated. Owens is essentially arguing that the very act of issuing this subpoena constitutes defamation because it falsely implies she lacks editorial independence and professional integrity. But the most damaging revelation came in Owens' description of how Lively's original New York Times story was crafted. According to her account, this wasn't standard journalism at all. It was months of coordinated collaboration between Lively's team and reporter Megan Twohey, the journalist who helped launch the Me Too movement. The alleged timeline is particularly damning. Lively's team and the New York Times worked together for months, developing sources, crafting the narrative, and building what Owens describes as a hit piece designed to destroy Baldoni's career. Meanwhile, Baldoni himself was only contacted the night before publication, given approximately 4 hours to respond to complex allegations on a Friday evening, just days before Christmas. If accurate, this timeline suggests something far more calculated than typical celebrity damage control. It implies a deliberate strategy to minimize Baldoni's ability to mount an effective response while maximizing the story's impact during a time when most people's attention would be elsewhere. Why does this matter from a legal standpoint? Because it creates what attorneys call a clean hands problem. If Lively engaged in coordinated media manipulation while simultaneously accusing her opponents of the same behavior, it undermines her credibility as a plaintiff and could influence how judges and juries view her claims. More importantly, it raises fundamental questions about the nature of modern media warfare. When does legitimate public relations cross the line into manipulation? And when powerful figures coordinate with major news outlets, does that coordination compromise the outlet's independence and credibility? The financial dynamics also can't be ignored. Owens pointed out something crucial. If Baldoni's team was actually paying content creators for favorable coverage, they certainly wouldn't choose smaller channels when someone with Owens' massive reach and expensive rate card was available. The economics simply don't support the coordination theory. Could this subpoena actually be Lively's biggest legal mistake yet? The early signs suggest it might be. But before we dive into the legal implications, smash that like button if you're finding this analysis helpful, and stick around because we're about to reveal the most shocking part of this entire story that could change everything you thought you knew about this case. The entire controversy began during the production and promotion of It Ends With Us, where Blake Lively accused Justin Baldoni of sexual harassment and creating a hostile work environment. Lively filed a lawsuit claiming that Baldoni engaged in inappropriate behavior and then launched a coordinated campaign to damage her reputation when she spoke out. Initially, the story seemed straightforward. Another powerful man in Hollywood accused of misconduct, with damning text messages and communications appearing to support the allegations. The New York Times published a lengthy investigation that painted Baldoni as a manipulative figure who crossed professional boundaries. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of the typical Hollywood pattern where accusations lead to immediate career destruction and quiet settlements, Baldoni fought back hard. His legal team released what they claimed was the full context of communications, suggesting that selective editing had created a false narrative. This is where content creators like Candace Owens entered the picture. As more evidence emerged, several independent voices began questioning the original story, pointing to inconsistencies and raising doubts about the initial media coverage. Owens became particularly vocal, framing the case as an example of how mainstream media can be weaponized by powerful celebrities to destroy their targets. She positioned herself as investigating the story independently, even creating a tip line for people to submit additional information. The question that hangs over everything: was Owens genuinely conducting independent journalism, or was she part of a coordinated counter-narrative designed to rehabilitate Baldoni's image? From a legal perspective, this subpoena battle reveals just how high the stakes have become for both sides. Blake Lively's decision to target Owens with a subpoena represents a significant escalation. In simple terms, they're trying to prove that what appeared to be independent media coverage was actually a coordinated public relations campaign designed to damage Lively's credibility and support Baldoni's legal position. If successful, this strategy could potentially undermine much of the favorable coverage Baldoni has received from content creators and independent journalists. It would transform the narrative from independent voices questioning the official story to paid operatives executing a coordinated smear campaign. But here's where the legal strategy becomes incredibly risky for Lively's team. Owens is claiming reporter privilege, the same legal protection that allows journalists to protect their sources and maintain editorial independence. Courts generally take these protections very seriously, especially when dealing with commentary on matters of public interest. More importantly, Owens has essentially called Lively's bluff. By threatening to sue for defamation over the mere suggestion that she would let somebody put words in her mouth, Owens is challenging the fundamental premise of Lively's legal theory. This creates a dangerous precedent question. If content creators can be subpoenaed and forced to reveal sources simply for covering controversial topics, what does that mean for independent journalism? Courts are typically reluctant to set precedents that could chill legitimate reporting. The strategic implications extend far beyond this single case. If Lively's subpoena is successful, it could open the door for celebrities to routinely target unfavorable coverage by demanding access to journalists' private communications and sources. Was this legal gambit a stroke of genius, or a catastrophic miscalculation that could backfire in spectacular fashion? This legal showdown represents something much larger than a typical celebrity dispute. It's become a flashpoint in the ongoing war between traditional media and independent content creators. Owens has positioned this case as emblematic of how mainstream media has lost credibility by becoming too cozy with powerful interests. Her argument centers on the claim that the New York Times essentially functioned as Blake Lively's public relations
But this
arm,
wasn't just any
spending
industry
months
figure.
crafting a
This was
narrative
Blake
designed
Lively.
to destroy Baldoni,
And she wasn't
while
willing
giving
to
him
let it
minimal
slide.
opportunity
In
to
a bold
respond.
legal
If this
move,
characterization
Lively
proves
filed a
accurate,
civil rights
it could
lawsuit
fundamentally
not only
damage
against
the New York
Baldoni,
Times
but
reputation
against his
for
team,
independent journalism.
accusing them
Major
of orchestrating
publications
a
have
coordinated
historically
effort to
maintained
silence
strict editorial
and discredit
independence
her.
precisely
It marked
to
a
avoid
turning
these
point.
kinds of
A
credibility
lawsuit
challenges.
like this
But the
is rare in
implications
Hollywood,
extend
not
beyond
because
media
misconduct
credibility.
doesn't
This
happen,
case is
but
testing the
because it's
boundaries of
usually
what
buried,
constitutes
whispered
legitimate
about,
journalism in the
settled in
digital
secret.
age. When content
Lively
creators
went
like
public.
Owens
The
investigate
response
stories,
was swift
collect
and
tips from
divisive.
sources, and
Some
publish
called her
commentary,
brave.
are they
Others
functioning
accused
as
her of trying to
journalists
control
deserving
a
of legal
narrative gone
protections?
wrong.
Or are
Social
they
media
simply
erupted
influencers
with
whose
debates,
opinions carry no
gossip, and
special
wild
legal weight?
theories.
The precedent set
How could
here
this
could
happen on
determine
a
whether
set that was
independent
supposed to tell a
voices can
story of
continue to
female
challenge
empowerment?
dominant narratives
Was it
without
all a
facing
publicity
legal
stunt?
retaliation
Was there
from
more to the
powerful
story?
interests who
Baldoni's
control
camp
traditional
fired
media
back,
channels.
denying
From Blake
all
Lively's
allegations
perspective,
and
the
painting
calculation
the lawsuit
appears
as
to be that
faceless
proving
and
coordination
vindictive.
between Baldoni's
His lawyers
team
claimed
and
that
content
Lively's
creators will
version of
discredit
events
the
was
favorable
one-sided
coverage
and
he's received
sensationalized
and
for
restore her
public
position
consumption.
as the victim
At
in
one
this
point,
situation. However,
a statement from
early
Baldoni's
signs
team
suggest the
implied that
strategy
the
may
actress
be
was trying to
backfiring.
use her
Owens'
celebrity
defiant
status to
response has
weaponize
generated
public sympathy
significant
and
sympathy for her
interfere with
position,
the fair process.
while raising
But in
uncomfortable
a digital
questions about
world,
Lively's
public
own media
perception
strategies.
matters.
The broader
And
entertainment
here,
industry is
Blake's
watching
story
closely
started to shift
because the
from that of an
outcome could
actress
establish
making a
new
comeback
rules for how
to a woman
celebrities can
fighting to be
respond
heard
to
in a
unfavorable coverage. If subpoenaing content creators becomes a standard tactic, it could fundamentally change the landscape of entertainment journalism. Here's what makes this entire situation absolutely fascinating from a strategic standpoint. Both sides are essentially accusing each other of the exact same behavior. Blake Lively claims Justin Baldoni coordinated with content creators to damage her reputation through favorable coverage of his position. Meanwhile, Candace Owens claims that Lively coordinated with the New York Times for months to damage Baldoni's reputation through biased reporting. The irony is almost poetic. Each side is pointing to the other's media strategy as evidence of manipulation and coordination, while defending their own approach as legitimate journalism and public relations. But here's the critical difference. Owens is claiming reporter privilege and editorial independence, while Lively's team appears to have directly collaborated with traditional media outlets. One of these approaches enjoys stronger legal protections than the other. This smart money suggests that Owens will successfully quash this subpoena. Reporter privilege is taken seriously by courts, and the evidence threshold for overcoming those protections is typically very high. Lively's team would need to prove not just that coordination occurred, but that it involved illegal activity or fraudulent behavior. More importantly, this entire controversy has shifted attention away from the original harassment allegations and toward questions about media manipulation and journalistic integrity. Whether that shift benefits Baldoni or damages both parties remains to be seen. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in understanding how this saga unfolds. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because we'll be covering every twist and turn as this case develops. The courtroom drama is just getting started. The ultimate question looming over this entire saga, in an era where traditional media credibility is already under intense scrutiny, can Blake Lively's legal strategy survive the scrutiny it has invited? And if this case goes to trial with a jury of ordinary people who increasingly distrust both Hollywood celebrities and mainstream media, which narrative will prove more compelling? The next few weeks could determine whether Blake Lively emerges vindicated or whether she becomes a cautionary tale about the dangers of weaponizing media coverage in legal disputes. What do you think? Is this a legitimate attempt to expose coordinated misinformation, or a desperate attempt to silence unfavorable coverage? Drop your take in the comments below, and if this video opened your eyes to how complex this legal battle really is, show some love with a like and subscribe for more deep dive analysis.